Hello, everyone. We are so happy to have you here with us on the Stronger Marriage webinar produced by the Utah Marriage Commission, hosted by Utah State University. I am Naya Phelps, and we are so excited to have you join us today. In today's webinar, we are so excited to be joined by Andy Hogan. Andy was born in Idaho in 1971 and grew up in Utah. At the age of 20, while serving a mission in Taiwan, Andy suffered bipolar maniac psychosis. He was tranquilized and flown back to the USA, where he woke up with memory a week later in a psychiatric hospital. Over a month later, after being released from the hospital, Andy suffered years of life-threatening swings between depression and mania before taking 5 steps to reach a meaningful, productive, and peaceful life. Since graduating with high honors from the University of Phoenix with a clinical mental health counseling master's degree in 2018, Andy continues to promote mental health as a licensed national certified clinical mental health counselor and international author and speaker. Andy travels the globe and cyberspace to provide counseling services and classes to English and Mandarin speaking clients and caregivers worldwide. If you have joined us for the CEU credit, make sure you stay on until the end of the presentation. The survey needed for the credit will automatically load onto your screen, and then you will receive an email from the Utah Marriage Commission with your certificate. You can also email the Utah Marriage Commission at marriagecommission@usu.edu to receive the survey on this webinar. Once the survey is completed, you will attain an email with your CEU credit certification. We will now turn the time over to Andy for his presentation.
Awesome. Thank you, Naya. Okay, let me get share screen going and we will begin. Oops. Oh, that's the wrong one. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, as I talk, oh, okay, I got to go backwards a little bit. As we talk, I'm going to have a lot of questions. And so if as I ask the questions, instead of answering them right away, write down your comments in the comments section. And at the end of the PowerPoint, we will talk about your questions. So again, as you have questions, and I'm thinking you probably will, type them into the comments and we'll talk about them at the end of the presentation. So, title is Love for Mental Illness in Relationships. We're going to see what that means. So let me take you back a little bit. Naya, in her introduction, talked a little bit about how mental illness came into my life. And this is a picture of myself and at the time, a lady I was dating. And let's go back to our first date. I had come home from my mission with manic psychosis, spent a month in a hospital, and was reassigned to another area in Montana, had another breakdown there, spent more time in a hospital, and then came home and tried to figure out life with bipolar disorder. And part of that life was my high school sweetheart. When she found out why I came home early from my mission, she got scared and she didn't want a relationship with me. So that breakup was probably rock bottom for me. But I decided a little while later that I needed to date. And so I went on the first date with this woman, with this young woman, and her name was Soraya. And on our first date, I decided I'm not going to play this game. I'm just going to tell her what's going on. And she can choose if she wants to have a relationship with me. So I told her. Um, and she decided that she had heard about me. That's the funny part of the story is she also served a mission in Taiwan, and she actually a different mission at a different time. But when I told her, "Yeah, did you hear about the guy who went crazy down in the southern end of Taiwan?" She's like, "That was you?" I said, "Yep, that was me." It was so bad that people in the other mission had heard about it. So anyway, on our first date, I told her all this, and she decided to keep dating me. And we got married. Soraya and I got married. This is a picture on our honeymoon. And I started noticing after our honeymoon, we started having, or I started having what I like to call after honeymoon whys. Why? Why this? Why that? I think every relationship has these. Um, we talk about the honeymoon part of our relationship and then it gets real. And that's what happened to us and ours. For example, I was always thinking about everything Chinese. I wanted to speak Chinese. I wanted to learn Chinese. I wanted to hang out with Chinese people. And one time there was this group of Taiwanese friends who wanted to uh, come during summer break and study English and also vacation. And I helped arrange all that. And it put a lot of stress on my wife. And so after they left, we would have these uh, heated conversations. And I noticed that there were cycles in these arguments that we would have. It's like something always felt the same in these cycles. And I noticed I was defending me and my position and my expectations. I was defending me, and she was defending her. And both of us would defend in these cycles that always ended in pain. Both of us would have emotional pain and separation. Sometimes the separation was we just wouldn't talk to each other, and other times we would physically separate for a while. So I started asking why. Why does she say those things? Why do I feel this way? Why do I feel so bugged? Why do I feel so angry? Why does she act that way? Why does she always defend? And why do I have these thoughts? Every time after these defensive cycles would happen, I just have these thoughts and I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why? Well, about 2002, we were married in 1995. About 2002, I I tried a new medication that didn't work, and I relapsed. Had very close call to more manic psychosis. And while I was recovering, I started writing my story as therapy. Um, and this story eventually became this book. And it just told my story of my life leading up to psychosis and the years following, trying to understand it by writing it down. I found that the World Health Organization definition of mental disorders, they don't call it mental illness, they call it mental disorders. So in this webinar, sometimes I'll say mental disorders, sometimes I'll say mental illness. I'm referring to the same thing. Mental disorders are clinically significant disturbances in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior. So what does that mean? What's cognition? What's emotional regulation? What's behavior? Had to learn those terms as well. And I figured out individual cognition was my disturbing thoughts. These thoughts in my brain that I couldn't slow down, that were so intense and so painful. Disturbance in emotional regulation. That meant what I was feeling, whether it was angry, whether it was frustrated, whether it was down, whether it was negative. Those were the disturbing feelings. And behavior, well, that's what I'm doing. That's how I'm talking to my wife. That's how I'm treating my wife. So I started to recognize that these were the symptoms of my mental disorders. My thoughts, my feelings, my behaviors. Those were my symptoms. And there were layers in the symptoms. Some of them were seen and some of them were unseen. Mental illness was usually at the source. So, my answer, my why answer, every time I ask that question, why this, why that? Usually my answer was mental illness. It's because of mental illness. So I started to recognize, and later on I got with, I don't know if you've heard of Ryan Shoup. He's the guy that plays Dream Big. If you know that song, then you know Ryan Shoup. I got together with him and a friend, another friend from Xinjiang, China. That's another story for another time. And we wrote music. And the song I wrote is called Recognize. So this is a song I'd like to share with you about how I started to recognize mental illness. Here we go.
Depression giggle person at first. It's right with all the lights on me down. And stare and steer away my passion every day and make me live forever like I'm first. Depression wants regression of my brain. It rules and the pulls of my heart. And hers thoughts of worry to dump me in a slurry of torture from a stark and poison rain. The tears, the tears, the emotions in the ocean of emotion. There's nothing more than the surface of the I should not confession of the truth. It's got the fingers I am eating. It's just to push my body against the cold light to bleed away the music on my head. The lies of brilliance. It makes the tears appear. Emotions in the ocean of emotion. In the surface of the Ignite the pleasure of a buried treasure, but independence is driving me insane. And open it to see the awesome person be, even with depression in the brain. So recognize the lies without the oceans of emotion, deeper than the surface of the emotions in the oceans of emotion, deeper than the surface of the
All right. My motions in My motions in the oceans of emotions probe deeper than the surface surfing fears. Try to say that 10 times. So, there were symptoms on the surface, and there were symptoms at the core. And I started to recognize those. So let's go back to the Chinese group, the Taiwanese students that came, and see if we can recognize those surface symptoms. Surface symptoms surface symptoms are the things that we see on the surface. They're the obvious behaviors and the obvious thoughts and the obvious things we say that are on the surface. So when my wife and I were arguing about this Taiwanese group, I was losing sleep. So on the surface, up all night. That was one of them. Thinks too much. That's another one. I was always thinking about it. It's like I was obsessed with it. Yeah, I was. And I was pushy. I was really pushy. I was pushy on my wife to do all these things to make this to try to make this group happy and to make it a success. And another thing on the surface that other people noticed was I was really high achieving. I got a lot of stuff done, and a lot of times people notice that on the surface. So now let's look at what were the clinical symptoms. What's a counselor or a psychologist going to see? Up all night could be insomnia, right? That's the term. Not sleeping. Thinks too much is called racing thoughts. Just, oh, I'm thinking about this. I just thinking so much and I can't slow it down. Can't slow down those thoughts. That's called racing thoughts. Grandiose thinking is when you have these ideas and they're these great ideas and it's bigger than life. That's called grandiose thinking. And there was one other, high achieving, that was goal oriented. I always had a goal and I was working so hard. I had so much energy to work toward that goal. What are those symptoms of? Do you know? Yeah, that's bipolar hypomania. So there's hypomania and there's mania. Hypomania is less severe. People with hypomania don't have to go to the hospital. If it's mania, then it's considered bipolar 1, and that means a manic episode. Like you had to go to the hospital, like I did back in Taiwan and then again in Montana. That was mania. Hypomania is when you're still functioning. You're having these racing thoughts, you're having these grandiose ideas, and tons of energy, not sleeping. That's probably hypomania. So that is the core symptom, and started to recognize it in my relationship with my wife. Then again, when I was trying this new medication, it was a really amazing, terrifying experience. Um, it happened every day when I would eat lunch. I'd get this feeling inside, and it was this horrible feeling. It was dark. It was uncomfortable. It was, if I started talking, like to anyone, if I just started talking, I would start crying. And I think the surface symptoms that other people may have seen was, man, Andy's a crybaby, or he's pretty weak. He's also very needy. And some people would say he's lazy because I couldn't work. So just wanted to sleep, didn't want to move. Those were some of the symptoms on the surface. So what's going on clinically there? Number one, loss of interest in things that used to bring pleasure. So loss of interest in life, loss of interest. Didn't feel like doing anything, not even going fishing, or not even going skiing, or not even going out and exercising. Like those were things that I used to love. And when this was happening, didn't feel like doing any of them. I was negative, talking about negative things, down, and intrusive thoughts. So intrusive thoughts, I think we're kind of learning what those are, because there was a viral video of a girl that was watching somebody on a cliff, and she says something, and the mom says, "Oh, that's an intrusive thought. We don't talk about that." Maybe you saw it. So intrusive thoughts are really scary thoughts that come into my mind, really scary things. And also sleep disturbance. Sleeping was not regular, too much sleep. Sleep was the escape from this torture that I was feeling. So I just wanted to sleep all the time. What's going on there? What's at the source of those symptoms? Did you get it? It's depression. Yeah, bipolar has mania and depression. It's the two poles, the two extreme poles. Really high, lots of energy, lots of ideas, racing thoughts, and then the opposite of that, really low, negative, down, no energy, don't even feel like moving, can't talk without crying, depression. That's what was at the core. Okay, then there was another one. This is a picture of me and my buddy, and we're all by these tapes. So these are tapes that over the years we sent back and forth. He lives in Taiwan, so he would be in Taiwan and I'd be in the USA, and we would send voice tapes. This is before Messenger and internet. So we just would talk on these tapes and mail them to each other. That's how we kept in touch. Well, I had all these tapes, over 100 of them, and I wanted to organize them. So I'm just like putting them in order. Like if you could see on those tapes every date, like they are in order of when I received them, and putting them up, just organize. And that's something I discovered was a surface symptom. I'd get zoned in. That's what my wife would call it. You're zoned in, and I'm not able to think about anything else except that project that I'm doing. And I'm organizing, just super organizing. And I feel like I have to finish it. I won't feel at peace until it's finished. So I'm staying up all night and I don't go to bed until I finish this project. What's going on with that? What do you think it is? Obsessions. So obsessions is thinking about something and you can't get it out of your mind and you can only think on that. That's an obsession. Compulsions is what you do because of the obsession. So the compulsion is organizing. Like I got to finish this project. That's the compulsion. And then ruminations are the thinking, the thoughts that are going around and around and around. Notice the O, the C, and the D. That's OCD. Yeah. We're also getting better at understanding what OCD is. We hear people say all the time, oh, that's my OCD, right? Yeah. When it's clinical, when it disturbs functioning and how you live and how your relationships are, that's when it becomes diagnosable. So I had OCD as well. And then one more I want to share. If you notice this picture, this is when we were first married with our kids. And look at my son, look at his hands. He kept taking his hands and he put them over his face like that, right when we were trying to take the picture. And it was driving me crazy. That smile on my face is so fake. Inside, I am majorly bugged. And when I get that feeling, I would get super quiet. Like not, I couldn't talk because I knew if I said anything, I'd yell at whoever was talking to. I'd be freaking out. That's what I'd be doing on the surface symptom. Something was bugging me so much, I'd be freaking out and I'd be super intense. The feeling inside me was just so intense. Okay, clinically, what's going on there? Bugged or getting angry easily is called irritable, right? Here's a joke. It's true, but it's a joke. I was at the psychiatrist with my wife, and he was asking her about my symptoms. And she said, yeah, I think he's been really irritable lately. That made me so bugged that she would say I was irritable. Did you get it? Being bugged is irritable. Okay. Worried when low danger. So the probability of the thing the person is worried about happening, the danger is probably pretty low. Like maybe they're afraid of flying on an airplane because they're terrified it's going to crash. Probably the probability is pretty low, right? So that's what I was feeling. Just like, I don't know what I was worried about with my son putting his hands over his face, but I was really worried. Maybe I was worried that we wouldn't get the picture, and if the picture didn't turn out right, then something bad would happen. I don't know. Panic. That's also it. Panic attacks. We're getting better at recognizing panic attacks. What's going on there? And also restless. Oh, restless. Just like, So intense, so restless. What's going on? Yeah, I bet you got that one. It's anxiety. Okay, so I started recognizing these in my life. So, how about you? As you're watching this and you're thinking about your relationships, are you starting to recognize mental illness in your relationships? The DSM-5 is the big book. It's the big purple book that counselors and psychiatrists and mental health people use to diagnose mental disorders. Guess how many there are in this big, thick book? Over 245 diagnosable mental disorders. There's a lot. When I was studying the DSM for my classes and for my counseling exams, licensing exams, I felt like I had everyone in the book, almost. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them. There's so many. So here's a statistic. 1 in 5 people will have a mental disorder in their lifetime. 1 in 5. So the chances of you and somebody in a relationship, one of you having a mental disorder, one of these 245 plus diagnosable disorders, is 2 in 5. So it's pretty high chances. Yeah. So here's the thing to remember. If you remember nothing else about this webinar, how you act, love is a choice, or react means fear. When we have fear, we just react. So how you act or react to the mental disorders you recognize makes all the difference in your relationship health. Yep. How you act or react when you start to recognize mental disorders, that's going to make all the difference in whether the person is willing to get help and if the person is willing to let you help them. So let's recognize some, we won't do all of them, but some of the mental disorders from the DSM. When I took my licensing exam, when I was studying for it, I made an outline of them to try and simplify it. And there's a lot. So we're going to go through this fast, and then it will be on the recording. And then if you want to come back and watch the recording on the YouTube channel after it's posted by Utah Marriage, so watch for the YouTube post. You can come back and you can see these. You can pause it and you can look at all of these disorders and their symptoms. So let's go through them really fast. Most of the ones that are listed in the book. Neurodevelopmental. So disorders in communication. This includes autism spectrum disorder. Do you know about autism? Yeah, sometimes since it's on a spectrum, even the person who is on the autistic spectrum doesn't know till much later in their life. So learn about autism, what it is. Learning disorders, motor disorders, tic disorders, other neurodevelopmental. Neurodevelopmental means how your brain is developing. If there are disorders, that means that in your brain's development aren't happening right, then it's probably listed here. Schizophrenia spectrum. So there's more than just schizophrenia. There's different disorders, and you can see them listed here. Catatonia is part of schizophrenia spectrum disorder. Bipolar and related. So we already talked about bipolar 1, bipolar 2. There's also one called cyclothymic. And then there's depressive disorders. I had a friend who had severe depression disorder, major depressive disorder. And he told me, man, I wish I had mania. He he was just depressed all the time. He never had bipolar mania or hypomania. So there's depressive disorders, anxiety disorders. There's a bunch of those. OCD, obsessive compulsive and related disorders. So you can look through those. Trauma. Okay. Most of us have heard of PTSD, right? That's one of them. There's other trauma and stressor related disorders. Dissociative disorders is what we used to call split personality. Disassociation is what it's called now. So dissociative disorder. Somatic symptoms means what's happening in your brain is manifested in body symptoms like headaches or other illnesses. That's called somatic symptoms disorders. Feeding and eating disorders. So most people know anorexia and bulimia, and there's others as well. Elimination disorders. This was an interesting one for me to learn about. Yeah, you can see what that is. Sleep-wake disorders. So part of my bipolar disorder is I have hypersomnolence. My sleeping is way messed up. I usually don't sleep until 3, 4, 5 a.m. and I usually don't wake up until 3, 4, 5 p.m. Even now, that's something that I still suffer from as I live with my mental illness. Breathing related, so sleep apnea. Parasomnias, okay. Did you know there's a nightmare disorder? Yeah, night terrors are horrifying for some people. Sexual dysfunction, gender dysphoria, disruptive impulse control, conduct disorder. These are the bad behavior disorders. And there's substance related, so addictions. Yeah, you can see there's a lot of different substances. Interesting to note, one of those is gambling disorder. Gambling can be considered an addictive disorder. Neurocognitive. So neurocognitive is what we used to call Alzheimer's. Well, it looks like we still do. Neurocognitive disorder due to Alzheimer's. Dementia is what we hear more about now. And Robin Williams. Did you know Robin Williams had neurocognitive disorder with Lewy bodies? Yeah, when he learned that, when he started to recognize how it was influencing his life, it was so discouraging to him that he took his own life. So understanding these disorders is really important. In many cases, it's a matter of life and death. Personality disorders. So have you heard about borderline personality disorder? That was the big thing with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case. Johnny Depp's psychologist was saying Amber Heard had borderline personality disorder. So you can come back on the YouTube video and look up that, learn about what that is. Paraphilic disorders, medication-induced disorders. So there we go. There's your very, very fast review of a lot of the disorders listed in the DSM. So we're starting to recognize mental disorders in our relationships. Now what? What do we do? That's the bigger question, isn't it? It's affecting our relationships. It's causing pain and separation. What do we do? So the thing to ask yourself every time you start to recognize, you start thinking, is that bipolar? Is that depression? Is that anxiety? Ask yourself, what is their need and what is my need? Let's talk about needs. Needs, as it turns out, is at the core of mental disorders. There's one more layer. And at the very core is our needs, the things we need. So remember Maslow, his hierarchy of needs? You probably heard of this, right? Let's review. What are our needs as humans? Number one, right at the bottom, right at the base, is our biological and physiological needs. We need to breathe. We need to sleep. We need to eat. We need to drink. Yeah, biological and physiological needs. That's at the base. Sometimes the reason we're irritable or depressed or anxious is because we're hungry. We even have a term for that now. It's called hangry, right? So sometimes myself, this is where I'm using myself as an example. Sometimes I get these racing thoughts and these obsessive thoughts, and I get irritable with my wife. I have to ask myself, what's my need? Why am I having these thoughts? Oh, I'm hungry. The thoughts are so intense and so powerful, I didn't even notice. Many times I don't even notice when I'm hungry. So ask myself, what's my need? Other times above that, when our physiological and biological needs are met, after that, okay, safety. We need to be safe. We need to feel safe. This one is so important. Um, it's so important that I have a whole class on it, that maybe another time I can share about safety and the importance of feeling safe and being safe in relationships. Above safe is love and belonging. Have you ever thought that these are things we need? We need to feel like we belong in a group. We need to feel like we belong with other people. That's why we get married, is because we need, well, one reason. Some people get married for physiological needs. Some people get married for safety needs. Yeah. Love and belonging is a big need we have when we get married and when we have relationships. Esteem and respect is another one. And then remember, the top one in Maslow's hierarchy of needs is self-actualization. So most of the time, when it's conflict in a relationship, when you're not happy, when you're feeling pain in a relationship, the need is probably safety or love and belonging. So I'm going to particularly focus on those. Let's go back to the situations and find the need, the situations that I shared earlier. So the Taiwanese group, we recognized the core symptom was bipolar hypomania. I had all these thoughts of racing thoughts, obsessions, really pushy, lots of ideas, lots of goals, not sleeping. What was my need? Well, turns out it was biological. I needed something for my brain. My brain, the chemistry inside my brain was causing these symptoms. And so talking about it with my wife, trying to resolve it, like it didn't work. In fact, it made it worse. So what I needed at the core was antipsychotic medication. Now that I've had this disorder for so long, I'm just starting to recognize, okay, these racing thoughts, these themes aren't as important as they feel. They're important, but they're not as big as they feel. They're not as grandiose. What I need right now is to slow my thoughts down. So I go take my antipsychotic medication. Okay, so what if you recognize this in your spouse? Or what if Soraya recognizes it in me? What do I need her to do to meet my need? In other words, if she's like, "Did you take your medication? I, I think you're getting manic. You need to go take a pill." Is that what I need? What is that when you say to someone, "Hey, go take your pills"? What is that? It's fear, isn't it? I'm afraid of what you're doing. So I'm trying to fix you. I'm trying to control you. I didn't need fear. I needed safety. So what creates a feeling of safety? You got it. It's love. So again, how you act or react when you recognize it, that's what makes the difference in whether they're willing to do what you want them to do. If somebody says, hey, go take your meds, that's your reaction to fear. And they're going to feel that fear. It doesn't feel safe. So they feel like their need is to defend themselves, not do what you're telling them to do. Interesting, isn't it? The need to do what my need to do what she wants me to do is for her to give me love. What about the situation where I was super depressed? Yeah, the core there was bipolar depression. And again, this was very chemical. It had to do something with what I was eating and when I was eating, because the minute I ate lunch, it just hit me like a wall. And I couldn't talk about it. I mean, counseling wouldn't have helped because my need was biological. I needed something to mess with the chemistry or help with the chemistry in my brain and in my gut. We're learning that gut health is just as important as brain health. So I needed antidepressants. This this incident, this time in my life is when I started taking antidepressants, and they helped. They made me able to function again. So again, what was my need if somebody wanted to help me or tell me to take my meds? If they recognize this is depression and you need meds, how can they tell me what's my need from them? Once again, it's not their fear. It's not them saying, this is really scaring me. Man, I'm going to leave you if you don't get help for your depression. You need to go to counseling. That's fear. And it's not helpful. What I need is love. And what everyone needs is love. These are hard things to accept. These are hard things to learn. I'm mentally ill. Oh, when I hear that news, it's got to be loving. Otherwise, I'm not going to hear it. I'm going to defend against it. What about my OCD? What's the need? Well, this one, it's not so bad that it's interfering with my functioning. In other words, I'm not in a hospital because or I'm not staying home all day. You know, the typical OCD example is someone is their obsession is germs. And so the compulsion is they wash their hands over and over and over and over. And they can't leave the house because they're so afraid of germs. So that's influencing functionality. My OCD, I can still go about my life. So when I get obsessed about something, about a project, and I'm doing it, and if my wife wants to tell me that I need to listen to her, I need to understand her needs, how can I? Yeah. So my need is safety. I'm doing this because I feel like I'm I'm going to be anxious if I don't do this project. So the need is to feel safe, to feel at peace, to not feel anxious. So, how do you tell somebody that? Once again, lovingly. Love is the need we have if we're going to hear it. And then anxiety. What's the need with anxiety? Well, for me, it's love. When I'm feeling super anxious about something, um, I don't need someone to tell me, stop thinking about it. Or this anxiety is really bad. You gotta fix that. You gotta, you gotta go to counseling. You gotta do something. No, the need is love. So in counseling, if I'm telling a counselor or if I'm telling a spouse, yeah, the need is love. So are you seeing the trend here? Why is love the answer? And we don't have time to get into that. So, very fast, I'm going to go through next time. Hopefully, there will be a next time, and we can talk about why love is the answer and how to give love instead of fearful reactions. So, just a quick advertisement for a next time webinar. When our needs are met, we use the prefrontal cortex of our brain. There we can talk about logic, consequences, and other people's feelings. When we're feeling love, we use the prefrontal cortex part of our brain. When our needs are not met, when we don't feel safe, when we don't feel love, when we feel hungry, etc., we use a different part of our brain called the limbic system, specifically the amygdala. Fear is the trigger that moves our brain from the prefrontal cortex to the limbic system. In the limbic system, we have the fight, flight, freeze reactions because that's where our memories of pain are. So, when we're fight, flight, and freeze, in other words, when we're feeling fear, when we're reacting to fear, we defend ourselves against whatever we're afraid of. And that's what causes those defensive cycles that I talked about. So the question why, with and without mental illness, if you're asking, why is there pain? Why is there separation? Why don't we feel like a couple? Why do we feel like roommates? Why? Why do husbands stop sharing feelings with their wives? Why do wives say they can't communicate? We just can't communicate with each other. Why do children stop talking to their parents? Usually about 11, 12 years old. Why? Here's the answer. These are the communications that we all do. These are the reactions to fear. So, like I say, we can talk a whole session, a whole webinar about these, why we communicate with them, how we communicate these. Bottom line, fearful defensive reactions are the reason for pain and separation in relationships. If we're talking about mental illness, it's the same thing. If we react to the fear, like they're freaking us out, if we react fearfully with counterattacking, with explaining, with criticizing, it's going to cause a defensive cycle that will end in pain and relationship separation. If we choose to act with love, what happens? Now I know my fearful defending causes pain and separation. Am I willing to become a part of the 1% who communicates differently than blind defensive reactions? We all do it. Every one of us. There's only one person in the world who didn't react to pain fearfully. The one perfect person. The rest of us, we all react to pain with fear. So now we know what's happening. We know why. Are we willing to try to communicate with love? The way is THERV. And next time, I'm going to share what those are. These are the communication skills that communicate love instead of fear. Thank you for letting me share this webinar with you. This book, Love for Mental Illness, is the book that has all of these steps in it. So you're welcome to find the book at my website, reachandyhogan.com. Put in a shameless plug there. So yeah, it's in the book. It's all in the book as well. Thanks for having me. And I'm going to stop share and then go back to Naya for question and answer.
Okay, awesome. So we have three questions. The first one is, have you ever been treated differently after people know that you have bipolar disorder?
Yes, I have, both positively and negatively. The most memorable negatively was when I came home from my mission and I was in the hospital, locked in the hospital, couldn't leave. And my high school sweetheart came to see me. And that was where she kind of learned what I had. Nobody told her I had bipolar disorder. They just told her I had mental exhaustion. So I guess it's really not fair to her that nobody ever told her this is mental illness. This is what's happening. But just how I was acting scared her away, and it ended our relationship. So because of mental illness, I lost her, which turned out to be a good thing because I met Soraya and we're happily married. So that's the other one. The other most memorable part is when I told Soraya, "Hey, I was that guy that went crazy in Chaozhou, Taiwan," and she was like, "That was you?" I said, "Yeah. If we're gonna have a relationship, I want you to know that you're gonna be dealing with this." And she went home and she talked to her parents about it. And her parents said something that I will always remember and that I'm so grateful for. They acted with love instead of reacted with fear, like the high school sweetheart did. She reacted to fear by leaving, right? Separation, that was the result. My wife's parents told my wife, well, my friend at that time, she wasn't even a girlfriend, just a girl I was dating. They told her, if you decide to love him, we will love him too. That was their response to knowing I had bipolar disorder and mental illness. So it's both ways. Part of my steps, my REACH steps. Today we talked about recognize, just the first step. The A is for become authentic. um, Authenticate who I am and what the mental illness is. That's a major step, a major process, trying to figure that out because mental illness gets mixed up in our personality, in our thoughts, in our feelings. So it feels like who we are. Even in our speech, we say, oh, that guy's bipolar, right? We even say it that way sometimes. So becoming authentic means choosing who you want to be, how you want to live, and understanding the mental illness. Part of that means you talk about it. You tell people, I have mental illness. So, but you need to also determine who is safe to tell it to. There's safe people and there's unsafe people. Most people, most people want to be understanding, want to be helpful, want to be caring. But there are some who don't. So it's important to know, number one, to talk about it, but to know who to talk about it with and when to talk about it.
Awesome. Okay, the next one says, how can you support someone who needs help but won't get help or someone who refuses to take medication?
Yeah, good question. So the number one thought is, in my book, I talk about mental illness is like falling into river rapids and the person's drowning. So you're saying, what if you want to jump in and help them, right? Number one, you've got to not drown yourself. You've got to be safe yourself. That's number one. You can't save somebody if you're drowning. If they're grabbing you and pulling you under, then you're not safe and you can't help them. So that's number one. Number two is when you're safe, start to act with love instead of react to fear. So the natural person, the natural reaction to somebody when they have mental illness is to try and fix them. Tell them, oh, you got to take your meds. Oh, go get counseling. This counseling, I heard of this counselor and he's awesome. We try to fix it. So that fixing is our reaction, our fearful reaction to them. And sure, there's some love in there. We're saying it because we love them. But the part that they feel is our fear. So what you want to do is begin to choose empathy and validation. So that's the THERV guy, the little blue guy at the end of the presentation, right? These are the love skills that communicate love instead of fear. The number one and number two skill is empathy and validation. So when they're talking about their negative things, when they're talking about how hard life is, or how nothing helps, whatever they're talking about that's negative, instead of giving a fix, telling them what they should do, just give them empathy. Man, that sounds really hard. That sounds like your life just sounds, this is consuming you. And man, I'm sorry that this is hurting you so much. So what are you doing? You're feeling, or you're trying to feel what they're feeling, and you're saying it. You're saying what they're feeling. That helps them feel safe. Once they feel safe, then you can offer the fix. But don't tell them you should fixes. Trusting questions. That's the T of THERV. Trusting questions is, what do you think you can do to not feel this way? Or, I heard of a counselor that's really good. How would you feel about seeing a counselor? So instead of a fearful fix, you're giving a trusting question that lets them choose if they want to do the fix or not. And that's how you do it. What you're doing is you're moving from fearful reactions to loving actions, and it's a choice you make.
And then the last one is, how can you tell the difference between depression that is situational versus depression that is chemically driven?
Good question. Yeah. Um, the book, the DSM-5, actually defines this. Like, for instance, if somebody you love passes away, it's natural to be depressed after that, right? It's part of the grieving process. It's really depressing. It's really hard. Um, and so how do you know if that is clinical depression or not? The answer the book gives is how long it lasts. Um, if it goes into months, and months goes into years, and you're still feeling that down feeling, you're still unable to do life, you're still unable to function normally. Of course, the pain is always going to be there. Losing a loved one, that pain is always there. But does it cause dysfunction in your life? And how long? That's when you know if it's clinical or not.
Oh, awesome. I think that was the last question. Thank you so much, Andy. That was amazing. And thank you to everyone that joined us on this webinar. We're grateful for all your questions and your participation. Once again, if you attended the webinar for the CEU credit, make sure to stay on until the webinar ends for your survey and then the certificate, or email the UMC email to get that survey to get your certificate. Just a reminder, when I end the webinar, everybody's gonna disappear. Thank you so much again, Andy, and everybody have a great night.
Love you. Thank you.